or to his people. I did my DTS in 2021. After my DTS, I felt God called me mission. And I joined YWAM Burundi. It wasn't something easy as a firstborn. Of course, as Gen Z, you know, you have to finish your degree, you have to have a job, to have, financial, in terms of money, you have to be good and stable, It wasn't something easy for me as a firstborn in my family to join mission. And I prayed, I was like, God, why do you want me to join mission? Why do you want me to be in mission? Why? I'm very broken. I don't have anything to give to your people. I don't have anything to share. But God knew why he called me into the mission. I said yes to God. It wasn't something easy, of course. I was like, God, why? Why? I was having many questions, asking many questions to God, praying, crying to God. God, why did you choose me in all of this family? Why did you choose me? Why? You knew that I would be broken some earlier in my life, and you chose me to go and to stand for you, Jesus. Jesus Christ. Yeah. I was confused. I remember starting to join mission. I was like, God, my family wasn't agree with me to join mission. They was like, nope, there's no way you can go in mission. There's no way you can, because I grew up taking responsibility to my family. They was like, who's going to take care of your siblings? Who's going to be there for them? Who's going to stand there for them? It was to take that step of saying yes. Yeah. I cried. I was like, God, whatever will happen, I'm going. Whatever will happen to them is not my kids. They are not, I know you love them more than me. I know you will take care of them. So I'm going to stand for you and to share what you did in my life. After that, I asked God this question: are you going to take care of me, God? Are you going to be there for me, God? I didn't hear anything. But let me tell you something, my friends. God was with me. God was standing with me. Through my yes, God was like, yes, that is the only thing that I want from you. Your yes to obey, obedience. My friend, obedience from God can change. Your obedience can change anything, can change your story. Just to obey what God called me to be, and where my whole family gets saved. I remember I was like, God, I want to see my dad saved. I want to see my siblings saved. Of course, it was kind of Christian family, but was broken. Because of my yes, now some of them, they want to join me in mission. Through my yes, God changed my family. Through my yes, my dad got saved. Through my yes, now I can travel. I didn't know that I can stand, I can go and play. I was someone, community was pushing me down. You can't do nothing, you can't go anywhere. But now, because of my yes, his yes, because of hearing God's voice, because of hearing what he wants me to do and where, now I'm traveling, going to speak, going to share the word of God, share the love. I remember one day I asked God this question: God, what am I going to give to the community? Why I didn't receive anything, but he knew there was something inside of me that even me, I don't know right now, that I can give to the people. So I want to just encourage you. You may have some issue that you are going through or anything. Just say, Lord, here I am, send me. I remember I used to say, Lord, here I am, send me, but here I am, save me. I want you to save me. It's not easy to stand. It's not easy. But I want you to save me and to save my family, to save my community, to save your people. It's not my people, it's your people. I want you to save them. And I remember coming here in Muizenberg last 2 years, joined for community development. God showed me how community was really broken. God showed me how community needs me and you. Your community needs you. My community needs you. Your family needs you. Maybe your school needs you. Maybe your friends need you. Maybe these homeless people, they need you and me. God showed me how I was really broken. I was like, Lord, I know, but how? Of course, I was like having those questions. And it's good sometimes to ask God those questions. I wasn't having any answer in all of those things, but I saw God's hands pulling me, like, I'm with you. I will go with you. He gave me strength. And after that, I felt to join, like, do it a school of foundation counseling. It was like, it's something like someone was just, highlighting me somewhere, some places I was really broken. And, my goodness, in that course, God healed me, guys. I thought that I was healed, but God showed me some places that I was really, really broken. And I don't remember, maybe it was week 2 or week 3, they was talking about trauma and about family details, something like that. And God showed me how big family was really broken. Because everything starts from the family, guys. Everything starts from the family. You can't, because in my country they used to say, like, these kids, babies, it's the future of the country. How can you be the future of the country when the kids are getting broken in their family, in their own family, when they are getting rejected in their own family, their own parents? And then I started praying for them. I was like, God, I had that burden inside of me to pray for young people, for the kids, for the family, for the kids who are in the family. And then God showed me how family was really broken. So the reason why I'm mission is this. God put in my heart to see all of those kids who are rejected, to have a place that they belong. To see all of those who doesn't have love, to have love. Maybe it's you, maybe it's me. Just to give them love, to smile for them, to taking care of them, asking them, how are you? I grew up no one asking me, how am I? But God was there. And God brought people on my way, just asking me that. Give me that love. He gave me that love. He knew why. And dear Gen Z, I want to just to encourage you and say, you can do it with God. You can do it. It's not your mission, it's His mission. He didn't call you because He don't know where He's going to take you. He knows where He's going to lead you. Just listen to Him and obey Him. I want to just say something. Your past doesn't going to define you. But something is going to define you. It's where God is going to take you. It's God going to define. It's not your past. My past right now when I'm standing here, it doesn't define me. It's the past. I'm defined with God who made me who I am right now. Bless you.
This is okay, again, once more time. This is my story.
This is our story.
Aha.
That is his story. Hi guys, I need to keep time. Okay, so I just want to say my name is Mandy. I'm working for the... Thank you. I'm currently working for the University of the Nations. I'm the one that makes sure all your schools get registered and all your students get registered. And it's my joy and pleasure. But I want to illustrate to you my journey. So, Kwaya, you need to please just... I want them all to see just me.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. So, I started my DTS in 1990. Ooh. And then I did SBS 91. Ooh. And then I was in the kitchen for many years. Ooh. Oh. And then I went on to start staffing DTSs. Oh. And okay, I can go on and on and on. but you get the point. So, what I'm talking today about is older people in missions. Older people in this family called YWAM. Who are we? You don't know me. But I'm telling you, I've got a core. I got some other stuff too, but I've got a core that is strong. I've got a sore knee, so when I get there, it's definitely not easy for me to get up. I'm an older person in YWAM, but my core is strong. David, Edwin, Daniel, Vickers, Christine, I can't even mention, sorry if I don't mention your name. Giacomo. Guys, we've been around. We've done it. Our core is strong. We want to serve this wave with you. We cannot do it by ourselves. I don't always get up from the floor by myself. But I've got something to give. And I want you to make use of what I've got to give. And I want to invite you to reach out to the older staff and see what we have, because we have something. And that is my story.
Hey guys, so good. My name is Gabriel van Wyk. I'm originally from Durban, South Africa. Promise not going to be long. I'm going to keep this short and sweet, just like me. And just moving forward, what we're going to do, I just wanted to share, I'm a part of a missions organization called Circuit Riders, which is founded in Huntington Beach, California, in 2012. And simply the mission is to see the need, meet with love and repeat. Where we see a need on college campuses where Jesus has been misrepresented, we meet that with a simple love and repeat the cycle. And my story is simple. My story is someone who was on a university campus, who met Jesus from friends who prayed for him. And as my friends began to pray for me, I encountered the Lord 17th of November 2017, where God showed me how to forgive. And as I exited out of that, it was 2 years later, where I got a radical encounter in my bedroom to reach athletes all over the nation of South Africa. And the way that happened was, the Lord met me in my bedroom reading a simple story in leadership, and coming out of that, I started reaching out to athletes and starting a movement on my campus. And as I begin to do that, I'm like, God, how could you use this little colored kid from Durban to be in upstate New York studying and reaching athletes? And as that began to journey across, I went for training like a disciple at DTS. Went for DTS and I realized I was in the wrong path. And it's in Gospel Revelation Week with Peter Lewis, and I'm in this room, and he makes a call for all black African Americans to come to the front. And I'm sitting in my seat as a colored kid, and I'm like, is that me? And I'm like hesitant to go, and I'm like, I'm not black, but in America I am. But I'm not black, I'm a colored. And I'm like, what's going on? And this other girl comes to me and is like, Gabe, you're from South Africa, you need to be in the front. And I go to the front and I'm like, I should not be here. And I'm standing in the front, super uncomfortable. And as people began to pray for everyone who was in the front, I was the only one who was missed. And I'm like, ooh. For the first time in my life, I questioned my identity of who I am as a person, as Gabe. And this was the biggest giant I have ever faced. And I remember in that moment, my core, I felt a rip going down my core. And I just heard the Lord say, your giant has arrived. And I remember sitting in there, so confused, so gutted. I wanted to jump on the next flight home in my DTS because I have no place. And I remember going home and I'm journaling. He's not here, but I ended up calling the leader of FNF South Africa, Gabe Strydom, good friend. And I'm like, bro, this is what's going on. This is what happened. And just him investing in me, there was a whole different angle that had changed. And for the sake of the future of missions, this is what you have to go through. For the future of missions, Gabe, you're a son, this is what you're going to have to go through to bridge the gap between different nations, to bridge the gap between different cultures, to come together into a simple storyline of what God is doing in the nations. So my story is this. Gabe, a man from Sydenham who went over to the United States, felt a calling in the sports industry, only to come find out you're called in to bridge the gap between multicultural, multinational, multiracial groups all over the world, that we could come together as one under the name of Jesus. And this is my story.
Wow, that's beautiful. This is our story. This is our story. Now, without wasting any time, I'm going to call David Hamilton. David Hamilton is actually one of the part of the founders circle of YWAM, but also part of the president team of the University of the Nation. He's also a very innovative, I call him the think tank of YWAM, where he, I don't know if you've ever seen an app called SourceView. He is the creator of that app, and then there's also a map called 4K map, and of which often in nations to nation we pray over that map for the nations, and people receive their call to the nations through that map. There are some here, and he's also an author. And I had a privilege in 2008 when he came to Todd in our LTS in Amsterdam when Edwin Phillips was leading. And there is a book of his I love. And I think that every YWAM still today should get Courageous Leaders. And I really believe that it's a very good book to look into. And without wasting any time, I want to invite David Hamilton. Thank you.
Bless you. So grateful for you. Well, I can do my story very fast. One of the key things when you have someone speaking, you want to know something, a little something about them. The key word is a little. So if someone has a watch with your phone, if you can measure 15 seconds, put it on your stopwatch, give me 15 seconds. Who's going to do this for me? You got it? Okay. So when you're down to 12 seconds, put your hand way up in the air and count down the last 3 seconds like this, okay? You tell me when to go. 15 seconds, my whole life story. Yeah, and you're going to tell me when to, you put it up. My name is David. I was conceived in Bolivia. I was born in the United States. I was born again in Mexico. I was filled in the Spirit in Peru. I was called to missions in the Netherlands. And since then, I've been to another 224 nations, making for a total of 229. So I'm a son of missionaries. I grew up bilingually, biculturally. I'm a missionary with YWAM for 47 years. And I'm married to a missionary. I have 4 kids, all of whom are missionaries. They're not so kids anymore. They're all married and have kids of their own. I've got 9 grandkids, and I trust they will all be missionaries someday too. It is such a privilege to be here in South Africa. I love the worship with you. I love the song and the dance and the enthusiasm for Jesus. This is my 38th time to South Africa. It's one of my favorite places. My family of 6 and I, we lived here at different times in the early part of this century. We've lived here in the Cape. We lived up in Worcester. We lived up in Gauteng, in Midrand between Joburg and Pretoria. But we visited every one of the provinces and just love this land. So it's always great to be back here. And I've tried a couple times to talk the Lord into giving me a call for South Africa. It's not worked yet, so you can keep talking to him about that on my behalf. But I'm grateful every time he says you can go for a few days or a couple weeks. It's just such a joy to be with you. We want to talk about the waves. And we all know the vision of the waves that Lauren Cunningham had. But I want to give some context and put this into a framework from Lauren's life and our life together, but even going back further, because what Lauren experienced the day that he had the vision of the waves was like something that was experienced by others in the whole story of the people of God, going all the way back to Abraham 4,000 years ago. And in 2010, so that's 14 years ago, when YWAM was celebrating its 50th anniversary, God began making us aware that that vision of the waves, because we use the word vision very loosely, right? We have 3 or 4 visions every day, sometimes. And so people talk about visions very, very lightly. And there's some visions that are just for your activity on that outreach that afternoon. And there are some that are really are macro, mega visions that really impact not just you for one afternoon, but may impact millions for generations. And that's what this vision of the waves was about. But that's not the first time that something like that has happened. And so as we pondered on this, we came to understand that this vision of the waves was best understood if we think of God as the covenant-making and covenant-keeping God. That it really is a covenantal encounter that Lauren had that led to the vision of the waves. And so we began studying the scriptures about covenant and trying to understand God's ways in that, because anytime you have an experience in our life, we should drive us back to the Word to check out our experiences. Do they align with the Word? And if they don't, we don't align the Word to our experiences. We align our experiences to the Word, right? That's our standard. So we began looking at a covenant a lot at that period of time. And in one of those times, I was struck by a passage in Deuteronomy, which is not true. Are you coughing because you have a cold, or because I just said something that's ghastly to say? You never expected to hear David Hamilton say, read something from the Bible that is not true. There are a lot of things that are not true in the Bible. Do I have your attention? In Genesis 3, a serpent said, "You won't die." Is that true? Well, it's true that it happened. It's true that that's what was said. But what was said was a lie. When the Israelites went out into the desert, the Egyptians said, well, God will kill them because he's displeased with them. Was that God's intent? No. So was that statement true? Historically, yes, that was what was said. That was what was believed. But was it an accurate reflection about the character of God? No. So when you read the scriptures, you need to be careful how you read it. The Bible is true. Everything in it is historically true, but you need to look at the context, because the Bible truly tells us about the lies that were believed or spoken out at different times. And sometimes it's not just a lie, but something that just shocks you a little bit. So I'm going to take you to the book of Deuteronomy. And Deuteronomy, how many have done BCC, a DBS, an SBS, or some kind of Bible school with YWAM? Can I see your hands? Everyone, just wave them high. It's remarkable you've done that. Everyone else, you can do one too, okay? You should. We have great schools. And so Deuteronomy happens 40 years after the Exodus. Israel is on the verge of going into the promised land. Moses, who began his journey at 80, is now about 120. And he's going to give this long speech, which is a summary of Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, and a couple other things thrown in, okay? And so he kind of retells the whole story again. And that's why it's called Deuteronomy, which is from the Latin means second law, because it's the retelling of what God had already done. Then the second time. So the whole thing, almost the whole thing is a long speech. It's a YWAM length message. You can read the whole book in 2.5 hours. And if I go 2.5 hours, you'll all be very upset because we'll miss lunch. So I won't. I'll be shorter than Moses. But when he starts off in chapter 5, he's talking to the generation that is going to go into the land. So all of these people that he's talking to were born in the last 40 years. Some of them were, some were up between 40 and 60, but anyone who was under 20 was not considered of sufficient age to, but everyone who was 20 years and up, 40 years earlier, God said they will die because they disobeyed me and they will not enter the land. So there was no one over 60 except for Moses and Caleb and Joshua. And there were a group that had left Egypt when they were children, but they were under 20 when the parents first decided they were not going to enter the land. And the great majority were under 40. So here's an old man, 120, speaking to people 60 and younger, okay? The next generation. And he says this in Deuteronomy 5:3, the Lord did not make this covenant with our ancestors, but with all of us who are alive today. Now, that's actually not correct. God made the covenant, the 10 Commandments, 40 years earlier. And the ancestors who are no longer alive were gone. So is he mistaken? Was he confused? I mean, he is 120 years old. Maybe his memory's starting to go off. What's going on? So we can't trust the word of the Lord. And so this sounds odd, perhaps. But if we get the idea behind this, it's really important for us that we think about the legacy words that have been given to us. What he's saying is that when God spoke 40 years ago, he wasn't just thinking about your mom and dad and your grandparents. God said these because he was thinking of you. God's a forward-looking God. He's thinking of the next generation. He's thinking about the future. And he says, you were in God's mind. And those of you who are alive today, who weren't alive when God spoke those words, this message was really for you. And so the things that God spoke in a similar way, the things that God has spoken to Lauren, many of which were long before you were born. So the first legacy word is the vision of the waves, this covenantal word, which was 1956, which means if you're younger than 68 years old, you were not born. Who is 68 or older? Can I see your hands? Okay? So this story, this situation is exactly like the Deuteronomy situation. Everyone was born after this word came. So I'm very grateful that I was 2.5 months old when Lauren had the vision of the waves in June of 1956. And you want to remember my birthday, just send me birthday cards. It's April 4th, okay? Very easy to remember, 4-4. So it doesn't matter if you put the month first or the day first, it's always the same, 4-4-56. Okay? That God waited till I was born before he spoke to Lauren. Because he had me in mind. He had Lauren in mind. He had you in mind. That's the point. It was not just, this is not a word for your ancestors. Sometimes when we think of multi-generation, we think, well, they're gone. God is doing something that's transgenerational, that's inclusive. But he spoke to Lauren thinking of you who were not yet born at the time. Just like here, Deuteronomy 5:3. Now let me tell you the story. You know the what of the vision of the ways. I'm going to give you some of the hows and the whys. But before I talk about Lauren and the vision of the ways, I've got to go back to a similar story in the Bible. Don't you love the Bible? Who loves the Bible? Aren't you glad that we have a word? And you know, when I speak about the Bible, I don't use the phrase Old Testament. Because something that's old, it's no longer as useful as it once was. It looks a little battered and beat up, and you're about to toss it in the rubbish bin, right? But we should call it the original Testament. Because something that has original value is worthy of preserving, right? So, in the original Testament, 4,000 years ago, we read the story of Abraham in chapter 15. And I'm going to depict this a little bit on the stage, and I'm going to need some volunteers, and I'm going to actually pick those volunteers. So you're going to be voluntold. So that's why it's important to volunteer to say, here am I, before you're going to be voluntold. And my brother Peter, you have a lovely white beard. Why don't you come up here? Would you put your hands together for Peter? And I want to tell you the story of Genesis 15. In this story, I'm going to play God, and Peter's going to play Abraham. Okay, so in Genesis 15, it starts off, and I'm going to add a little color, but you can check out the scriptures. It's pretty much like what I'm telling you, okay? It starts off commenting on how wealthy Abraham is. He's advanced in years. He's getting close to up in the 90s, and but he's got just so many camels and so many sheep and so many goats and so much money, gold and silver. He's a very, very wealthy man. You think, wow, I wish I was like Abraham. Don't you? Well, YWAMers, youth without any money. You think, wow, Abraham has it made. But in the beginning of the story, it talks about his wealth, and then the first things out of Abraham's mouth is he's grumpy, he's whining. And he says, but you haven't given me the most important thing. Abraham, that's your line. I'm doing it.
Okay. But you haven't given me anything.
And he continues to say, what good is all this wealth?
What good is all this wealth
when I don't have a son?
when I don't have a son?
And so he starts off whining. Have you ever whined? Told God forgotten the blessings and just told him all the things that haven't happened in your life? Well, I can identify with the father of faith. Okay? So he begins grumping like that. And then says God takes him and leads him outside. Now we read that. Now those are the words that are in the Bible. When he says he leads him outside, what does it mean? He was inside. Oh, see, Abraham's smart. He gets it. He was inside. He was inside what? Edwin says a tent. Yes, that's right. He was a nomad, a shepherd. They lived in tents and went around the desert. And so he's going to lead them outside. So they're in a tent. But this encounter with God is so real. It's not described as a vision. Like Abraham's in the tent, God's in the tent. And then it says God leads him outside. So I don't know how he did it. Maybe God told him like this, or maybe like this. But God's leading him. So it's going towards the edge of the tent, but you're the host, it's your tent. So you have to, we can't just go out, we can't walk through the cloth. You have to do something. Well, it's not a door, it's a tent. It's a
tin door.
It's a flap. Okay? So open it up. Yeah, it's kind of like more like this. It's not like a handle, right? Yeah, it's a cloth. And then we duck through, we come out, and then God said, Abraham, look up at the stars. Can you count them? And he said,
No, there are too many.
he knew the line. Isn't that great? Applause for this Abraham. And he says, well, Abraham, that's how many descendants you're going to have. And it says, Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness. Okay? And that verse is quoted several times in the New Testament. It's one of our foundational passages in the Gospels, right? And Paul. And then 2 verses later, the man who believed God, and who gets quoted by Paul, says, but how can I be sure?
But how can I be sure?
He knows the line. But how can I be sure? Has that ever happened to you? God speaks to you, you go, yes! Oh, how am I going to pay for that airplane ticket? Okay, this is a YWAM story, okay? So we go back between our highs of faith and our I don't know if this is going to really happen. That part doesn't get quoted in the New Testament. And so God says, you want to be sure? Then let's make a covenant. Now I need to explain to you what a covenant is like. So Abraham, you can stand to the side for just a moment. And we have a DTS here, right? So I need 2 young, handsome, strong men from the DTS. Go, 2 strong, handsome young men from the DTS. You pick them. Come up here. Okay, so you have a part in this drama. You've obviously been voluntold by your fellow classmates. So what you're going to do together, come close, shoulder to shoulder. Together, your role in this story is you are going to portray a cow. Okay. So you have to get down on all fours.
Both of us are cows.
What?
We're both cows?
No, you get down on all fours, I'll explain it, okay? All fours. But you are one cow. So you can only have, right now you have 8 legs. So you have to figure out how to just have 4 legs. No, side by side. Wait, are you trying to make him the butt? What's that? Oh, it was really not very kind at all. Okay, so, and that middle leg in the back, that can become your tail. Yeah, there you go. Squeeze in tight. Okay. So heads right together. You know, you don't want to be a 2-headed cow. Okay. Well, we have our cow. So this is how they did covenants in those days. And God said, prepare for the covenant. And you take a knife and you cut right through the head and down the spine, all the way back to the tail. And then now you're cut in half. And so the 2 parts fall each this way and that way. And you can't keep your head up, you're dead. Dead, okay? And so this cow, you can imagine there's blood everywhere, and there's no more mooing, it's just dead. And so the person who does this gets blood all over him, and when they finish this, then they do the covenant walk, which they call the blood walk. And so, Abraham, let's show you what it was like. So, come here. Yep. So normally when they would do this, because of cutting and blood's already spread over me, I've got blood on me, he's got blood on him. But sometimes we'd either cut maybe our thumbs, and then we'd put our thumbs together so our blood would intermingle. That's the beginning of handshakes. Or sometimes they'd cut a little bit here, and it'd be this kind of a shake. And so every time you shake hands today, it's that custom in all of our cultures began in the idea of covenant. Okay? And so what we do is we're going to walk together in between the halves, and then we're going to walk around this half, try not to step on the cow's head. And we're going to come back around here, and we're going back through the middle again. And remember, by now our sandals, our feet, everything's very bloody. We're going to walk around this cow's head and come back again. And we're going to keep doing that, in this figure 8. And when you put an 8 on the side, that's a symbol of what? Infinity, because it goes on and on and on, right? It's a forever. And what we say as we're walking is, this is our agreement, this is a covenant. This is what I promise to do for you, and you promise to do for me. And if I should fail on my part, you can do to me what we just did to this cow. You can cut me in half and put the halves out in the desert to be eaten by the birds. And you can say the same thing to me. If I fail, then you're authorized to cut me in half. This is a very sober commitment. It's much more than a promise or a contract or something like that we do today. Are you with me? Very vivid picture, right? Dead cows and the dead sheep, also they're walking through the half of the sheep, dead birds. So all the animals are laid out and dead, and you're walking through the halves of all of them doing these figure 8s. So now that's the background. So now we tell the story, okay? So cow, you can get back in place. No. Yeah, as a cow, yeah. No, the story's just starting now. So he says, I believe you, and he says, count him as righteous. Then he says, how can I be sure? And God says, I'll make a covenant with you. And he said, and God goes away. He says, but you get things ready. So God goes away, and Abraham gets his animals, and you cut the cow in half. And you cut the other animals in half. And now we need 2 young ladies from the DTS. Would you come? 2 young ladies, come please quickly. Quickly, come on up to the stage. And you are birds. And you see all this nice meat, and you're going to fly down and try to eat this meat. Yeah. And Abraham, you have to scare them away. So the birds are flying, and Abraham, you better hurry up. This one's getting close. Hey. And so they do this for a while, and the birds leave. It's all in the scriptures, okay? And then Abraham, remember, he's 90. That's a lot of work, cutting the animals and shoeing the birds. He gets tired and he falls asleep. And then sometime later, it's about evening, he wakes up and he sits on one elbow and looks, because there's a very amazing sight. There's a smoldering pot and a burning torch. 2 objects. Let me have another microphone. Right there by the cow's head. Thank you, cow. Don't move. No, I don't need it on. I don't need it on. So there are these 2 things. And they're going, and when he looks at it, he's not doing the figure 8. But these 2 objects are doing the figure 8. Okay? And what is it? What is going on? This is just one verse, and you might have just read and go like, that was interesting. But something much more interesting. What is going on is, one represents God. And the other is God identifying with Abraham. And God, the two persons of the Trinity are present in this act, or if not all three. And God is saying, I am responsible to see both sides of this covenant fulfilled. So instead of, if I do something wrong, Abraham understands this, you can kill me. And God never does anything wrong. And if you do something wrong, Abraham, you can still kill me. Instead of me killing Abraham, he can still kill me because he takes responsibility for both. God never fails. He is always faithful. But Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, their descendants, your parents, my parents, Giacomo's parents, you and I, we have all failed. And so God, through this wonderful act that you see in Genesis 15, commits himself that if we fail, he will die in our place. And friends, this covenant is fulfilled on Calvary's cross, where God takes our place because we fell short of the glory of God, because we sinned, we lusted and were greedy and were prideful and did all the things that we do to break relationships with God and with one another. And he stepped in and paid the price for us all. Now, isn't that a good story? Would you put your hands together for the cows, the birds, and for Abraham? Big applause for God, the real one. So again, I now want to just draw the parallel. That day, Abraham's vision is when he wanted a 9-month miracle. You know, he'd been married for decades already to Sarah, and I'm sure that more than once they tried having a child. He'd worked at it. That's what happens in a marriage, right? And it wasn't working for them. And he just wanted a 9-month miracle. One. And God said, oh, what you're thinking is way too small. I've got these billions of stars that will be eclipsed by your billions of descendants, billions more. And it's not just going to be for 9 months, it's going to be throughout the rest of eternity. You know, he says, I'm going to give you all these descendants, and sometime they're going to go down to Egypt, and 400 years later, again, just think of this. Abraham said, I want a miracle. 9 months, have a baby. Finish the plan. That's it. God says, no, you're going to have lots and lots of descendants. Step 2 is they're going to go down to Egypt. Step 3 is 400 years later, they're going to come out. How many of you have in your plan for the future, when you looked at each other and as Giacomo said, what is God's plan for you? Did you think, well, the third thing I want to do is going to take effect 400 years from now? So God, when he speaks to Abraham, step 1, 2, 3, the third thing is 400 years from now, Abraham. When God is the same God yesterday, today, and forever, we read in Hebrews 13:8. And that God who speaks to Abraham in that way envisions things over your life that you have not even begun to dare to imagine. And have projections of implications that are not just multi-generational, but multi-centurial. I just invented a word, I think. It's just hundreds and hundreds of years of projections of what God has seen. So how crucial is our obedience and our faithfulness and our dependency upon our gracious Lord, right? So because this dream of God was rooted in a covenant that he sustains by giving his very own life to undergird it, hope can be sure. Paul, when he writes of Abraham at this season of life, he said he hoped against hope. Because God's signature on that covenant was so strong that even though it seemed most unlikely in every human way possible that he would have a child, that God said, you will have a child. And many, many descendants. So in the same way, friends, when God gave Lauren the vision of the waves, it was in June of 1956. 2.5 months old. Lauren was within 10 days of his 21st birthday. Okay? He was, my boys, when my eldest son turned 20, they coined a new phrase. They said, well, from 13 to 19, you're a teenager. From 21 you're an adult. So when you're 20, you're not a teenager, you're not an adult, you're nothing. Only your brothers could come up with something like that, right? To mock the elder brother. But God, you are something in God's eyes at every season of your life. You're important and you're valuable to him. And so, Lauren was just 20, and he was in the Bahamas, and he was there with his band. Did you know that Lauren was the lead singer in a boys' band? There are four guys and a keyboardist, and they had actually pressed a couple records at that time on vinyl, plastic, back then. And they had performed live in all 48 states of the United States. There were only 48 at that time. It was before Hawaii and Alaska joined. And they had performed in a number of countries, Mexico, several countries, Central America, Canada, around the Caribbean, and that day they were in the Bahamas. So they were quite a hit. So he was the lead singer in this boys' band, and they used their music to attract young people, and then they talked about evangelism. And so they were there, and he was staying in the house of the missionary there in Bahamas, and he knelt down by his bed. It's a simple room. Here's the bed, and he's kneeling down, and he's looking across, and there's a white stucco wall on this side. There's nothing on the wall. And he starts praying and asking God for the message for that night. So again, his request is there are about 180 to 200 kids that are expected from the youth group, that small church, that night. We've had YWAMers from Kona this last year and celebrating Lauren's graduation. Went to that church in Bahamas and met one of the ladies who was there the night that Lauren spoke in 1956, our grandmother. And it was just wonderful connection with that story. And he said, I have one message, I just need the message tonight for these 200 kids. A small request. And when he lifted up his eyes from his prayer, he saw on the wall a map. There wasn't a map on the wall, it was just a white wall. And then the map became animated. The oceans started movements, and the waves began crashing on the shores. And then in the waves were faces of young people that were going from everywhere to everywhere, proclaiming the truth of God and demonstrating the love of God. That's the phrase. Youth, from everywhere, say from everywhere, to everywhere, proclaiming the truth of God and demonstrating the love of God. And that was more than just one message for 200 kids one night. It was the equivalent to the billion stars, something much bigger. It'd be 4 more years before Lauren started Youth with a Mission. But that was the covenantal vision, the foundational vision, the certain word of the Lord calling that came upon us as a mission. And so it's really important for us to consider this together. As God who treats all people with equal kindness and love, met Abraham and far exceeded Abraham's request. The Lord met Lauren and far exceeded Lauren's request. And as we keep following the Lord, there'll be requests that you have that he'll want to meet and far exceed, because that's the kind of God he is, a loving God, a generous God, a kind God, a wise God, a capable God. He can do this. And so, friends, like we said at the beginning, like Giacomo said, this could be like, wow, that was really cool that that happened to Lauren. Or you can say, hey, like the guys in Deuteronomy 5, we actually weren't born, but we're making this covenant our covenant. Technically, our parents were the ones who heard this first, but it's not about them, it's about us, and we're going to own this covenant. When you hear about these legacy words, a legacy is something that you, like an inheritance, that you impart from one generation to the next, which enriches the next generation. It informs, it strengthens, empowers the next generation. But it only is functional, like the first point that Giacomo said, if you receive it and embrace it. So we have to adopt the story. So my challenge to you today and throughout these days as we tell our story, our YWAM story, is that you would say, truly, this is my story, okay? That you would adopt a posture of adoption, okay? That you just position yourself to say, I am going to say everything that the Lord said through Lauren for us. I'm going to make sure I walk in the fullness of that. And to the degree that you do that is the degree to which you can see the flow of the blessing of God, of this anointing of God, this legacy of God express itself in your life. So that's what this is about. We're so grateful for Lauren. I had the privilege for in '83 was the first time I had a season of serving him as his PA. And over the years, the last 41 years, I've spent the great majority of my life trying to come alongside this man and serving him. So much learned, so many joys in that process. But as we talk about Lauren's legacy, it's really God's legacy through Lauren, that just like this Deuteronomy 5 passage is not just for that generation, it was not just for Lauren, it is for us. So will you make it yours? Will you make it yours? Yes. Why don't you just pray right now? Well, before you pray, I just turn with a person and talk to each other about what you like about this story. Whether the story is the Moses and Deuteronomy part, or the Abraham and the cows part, or Lauren in the Bahamas part. What stands out to you? What is God speaking to you? So in groups of 2 or 3, just talk for a few minutes and then we'll close in prayer. Okay, if I can bring you back together. If you could come back together, please. What I'd like you to do in those same groups of 2 or 3, I want you to do your own prayers, your own words. I don't want to have you just repeat by rote my words, but to convey to the Lord as we go through these days that you're going to receive and embrace these stories, this legacy as your own. This is no longer Lauren's story. This is our story. This is no longer Moses' story. This is our story. No longer Abraham's story. This is our story. And you make it personal. This is my story. Okay? So however you want to do that, just take a few moments to pray, and then I'll close us all together. Pray out loud with one another. Just listen to one, and then one pray, then the other, and just be witnesses to these commitments of adopting these stories and making them your own. Okay, let's wrap up our prayers. Let's come back together. And I just want us to say, I'm going to say, this was Lauren's story. And then you say, this is my story. And I'll say, this is Lauren's story. And you can say, this is our story, okay? Are you with me? This was Lauren's story. This was Lauren's story. This was Lauren's story. This is God's story. Lord, we thank you. We identify and embrace and receive. We adopt this. We want to walk in this story. We thank you that you're God who generation after generation faithfully and lovingly deals with his people. Thank you that we saw that in the life of Abraham and later in Moses, most perfectly through Jesus, and even to these days through your son, Lauren, how you communicated these truths to us. And we embrace these truths. We love you, Lord. There is no one else like you. Amen.
Wow, wow. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. Thank you, Lord. This is my story. This is our story. Amen. We're gonna be going for lunch now, but we just wanna encourage everyone to, if they can, we can try your best to be here at 2:30 sharp, and maybe even do better, do more precise like Germans, and be here at 2:25. So, and then tomorrow, of course, tomorrow afternoon we're gonna have free afternoon. So I just want to encourage you just to be there here. And then I think the session for this afternoon is also going to be quite important. And I think there's a progression that is taking place. And also during your lunchtime, I want to encourage you to just to even take a few minutes before the Lord. Lord, what am I hearing? What are you saying to me? Don't just let it pass by as another sermon. Thank you so much. You are free to go.